What's going on, guys? Hope everybody's having a great day. Please do me a favor, smash that like button. And if you get anything from the content, consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot, and I really will appreciate it. Also, I'd like to say Happy Easter today. Happy Easter. I hope everybody finds the prize egg, right? So, let's jump into this. So we've had a drought of information with the Idaho 4 case. There hasn't been much coming out ever since they started releasing warrants and reports and what they were looking for. Everybody dug into that and tried to make content out of that, right? And hey, I'm not hating on them. Do what you got to do. If this is your job, I understand. This is not my job. So that's why I haven't made a crap ton of videos on things that I don't necessarily believe in. I only get interested in things that make sense to me, that I can really go into. And just, I get into conspiracies a lot, but just any old thing, I can't fall in. I can't fall in line with that. I can't go in and say, oh, well, they searched for this, so this means this. It's just like with the information coming out about how Brian Koberger was being looked at by Pennsylvania police for other possible homicides. Of course he is. That doesn't make him a serial killer. If you're wanted for murder and you're a high profile case like this and you're arrested, the police wouldn't be doing their jobs if they weren't also going back looking at other unsolved cases to see if any parts of those cases match parts of this case and then see if they could tie you to it. That's their job. That's literally what they do for a living. This isn't breaking news that they're doing that. The breaking news is when they find that case, right? We all understand this, right? It's not breaking news that they're looking for other cases. The breaking news is when they find it, when they find a case and they say he might be connected to this case. That's a big deal. Even if they don't tell us which case, if they say we found a case he may be connected to also, that's a big deal. That's breaking news, but it's not breaking news that they're looking for it. But then right after that, we get the breaking news that he had one of the ID cards of a resident of 1122 King Road, which is where this tragedy took place at. But I found it very interesting that they said resident. I think it's weird, right? Like, why not say victim? If he had one of the victim's IDs, if he took a trophy with him, everybody watched Dexter on Netflix, right? If you're a true crime junkie and you didn't watch Dexter, what are you doing with your life? You're completely out of bounds here. You need to go binge it right now. In my mind, that's where I tie Brian Koberger to. He wanted to be part of law enforcement while pulling off crimes like this. That's if he's guilty. We're assuming here, but I mean, there's a lot about it. And it just drives me crazy when people act like there's not that much information. There is a ton of information that connects Brian to the case. Does it prove it beyond a reasonable doubt yet? Maybe not, because we don't know what's true and what's not. So that's why we have to presume him innocent. But we can't go around playing dumb and acting like, okay, the fact that he followed him on Instagram, that he ripped the pictures, that he messaged multiple times, that he left his house right before, that his phone had no service right before and then came back on right after. He's driving the same car. His tag not there on the front when everybody else in Idaho and Washington would have tags on the front of their car, but he wouldn't because he's from Pennsylvania. Then you have how weird he is, his profile. Then you go back to Pennsylvania and they're watching him and he's putting his trash in other people's containers trying to keep his DNA from being found, to the point they couldn't find his DNA. They had to use his dad's DNA to match it to the sample that they found as being the father of. Then when they did go in to finally arrest him, he's in the kitchen at 4 o'clock in the morning with rubber gloves on, digging through the trash, separating anything he might have had that had his DNA on it. There is so much pointing to he may be guilty. And then we don't know what they have as far as what's on his phone records, what's on his social media records. We don't know that stuff. So we can't say that it is something. That's something I push back forever. You can't say that there is something there and we just assume it to be there. But it's possible it could be there. And if you take everything we already know and you line that up, yes, of course, he looks guilty. How does he not look guilty to you? How do you feel like there's nothing pointing to Brian Koberger? Now, I get it. I get it. If you say that he's being framed, if you say that they're planting evidence, and then we got the Brady Giglio stuff coming out about a cop who may not be trustworthy, may have done something in this case or another case, and that he worked on this case. I completely understand those conspiracies. I do. I really get it. And I mean, it happens. It's not like it drives me crazy with people on the other side of that who act like it couldn't be something crazy or it couldn't be dirty police work, because we know it happens. It happens on a regular basis. Like I said, there's almost 400 million people in this country all living a day-to-day life, and shit happens. You might stumble into a situation where something like that is happening, but the odds of it are low, right? So if you're going to tell me that Brian Kohlberger is being set up, that he's being framed, show me some evidence for that. Give me reasons to believe that, rather than I just don't trust it. I just have a gut feeling, because that's ridiculous, right? Logic over emotions. Remember, we go that route. Anyway, the IDs. This was sent back on a report, right? When we got his arrest report and all that from Pennsylvania, when all that was released, we saw this picture right here, and it said this. And everybody was confused because they thought it was like 10 curls in a glove in a box, right? But in reality, it says ID cards in glove in box. It doesn't say in glove box. I know a lot of people have that kind of mystery. Like, oh, well, if he had his ID in the glove box, what's the big deal? No. He had ID cards in a glove in a box. Now, this goes back to the Dexter Morgan stuff, right? Dexter on Netflix again. He kept his little shoebox full of trophies from his victims. That's a serial killer, right? Now, we don't know that Brian Kohlberger is a serial killer. We have no reason to suspect that he's killed anybody outside of this, but there are little hints to, like, well, he acted this way and then suddenly he had a boost of confidence and changed his whole life around at this age. That could be just teen growing pains. It could have had some significant event, like he took the life of somebody for the first time, right? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know that he's innocent or guilty. But when we talk about this, we can't just bounce around and say, well, we don't know this and we don't know that. We're talking about what we do know, right? And if he had ID cards of a victim, then that's a trophy. But if he had ID cards stuck in a glove, stuck in a box, of one of the residents that were not a victim, aka Dylan Mortensen or Bethany Funke, then what does that tell us? Does that tell us that they were the target? Does that tell us that he might have had a relationship with them? He might have known them. They could have been friends. It could have been not out of the ordinary for him to be at that house. Maybe it could tell us that he could have been hanging out with Dylan Mortensen on the second floor and got into it with Ethan and Xana, right? Maybe he had to kill them two and then go upstairs and kill the other two who knew he was there. Maybe, right? I mean, that's where we put on our tinfoil hat right there, and we get into the conspiracies. But we have no reason to believe that yet. But as evidence comes out, maybe we will. Remember, Dylan Mortensen wasn't being attacked because she was a victim. She was being questioned about online because she's on the same floor that two of these murders took place on. She didn't hear that, but she heard all this little nonsense. Supposedly, she sees this man after the murders had been committed walking out the door and was close enough to notice his bushy eyebrows and his build. Yet she didn't see the big knife he had to be carrying since he didn't have a sheath. She didn't see the blood that would have been all over him since he just committed 4 horrific murders and a speed run record. How, right? Then she goes back in there and either sits in her bedroom for 8.5 hours or just goes to sleep and then wakes up, and then somebody else comes over and discovers the body and then they call 911. Really? That's why Dylan was being questioned. That's the whole point of Dylan being questioned. So if Dylan's ID is now somehow in Brian Kohlberger's property, now we got questions, right? Maybe it's not just, oh, well, he took a trophy. Maybe it's not just, oh, he wanted to go after Dylan, but he got the wrong 4. Maybe not, especially seeing that Dylan opened the door and saw him on his way out. Wouldn't make a lot of sense, would it? Would it? No, sirree. So if he had Dylan Mortensen's ID, we got a lot of questions to be answered. Why do I make such a big point about that? It doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't call it one of the victims' IDs. The point of saying it was a resident of 1122 King Road and not saying one of the victims at 1122 King Road, that there's such a big difference in my mind. There's zero reason not to call them victims. Zero. 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 It's absolutely nothing. It doesn't frame Brian Kohlberger in no sort of bad way, and they are victims. So if it was one of their IDs, then it would only make sense to say he had one of the victims' IDs. The fact that they used resident means that they didn't want to count out the roommates. Now, if you were going to say that whose ID it was, and it wasn't one of the victims, but it was one of the roommates, and you pointed that out and said, oh, he had Dylan Mortensen's ID, or oh, he had Bethany Funke's ID, what would the internet say? What would people start saying? How big would the conspiracy theories get about that? How often would Dylan be attacked? What would people think about it? What do you think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. If he had one of the roommates' ID, is there reason for him not to say that? I think there is. I think that if they come out and said that they found Dylan Mortensen's ID in Brian Kohlberger's car in a glove in a box, that everybody would go wild saying that Dylan knew him, that Dylan knew it happened, that Dylan had him over and she let him in. That's exactly what would happen, right? And they want to avoid that. They don't want to put their witnesses in harm's way. They don't want to put their investigation at jeopardy by letting information leak out that doesn't make a lot of sense to the natural public, right? They wouldn't. They would want to cover that up. Same thing with if it was Bethany Funke. So if it's not a victim's ID, then they would say a resident. That way you can't exclude the victims. But if it was a victim's ID, they would definitely say victim, because that paints a completely different picture. If he had Kaylee's ID, then obviously Kaylee was a target for him. And he went to that target, and then he discovered Maddie in the same room, and then he discovered Ethan and Xana coming back down, but Kaylee was his target. Now, I don't believe that. I believe Maddie was his target, but just an example. Now, if he had Dylan's ID, that sets up everything else. We already have all the drug theories that include Dylan and her boyfriend. We have the hit for hire that include Dylan and her boyfriend. We have the, oh, well, she described him, but she didn't say she knew him. In the damn arrest affidavit, it literally said that. Go back and look at what it said. It didn't say that she didn't know him. It said she didn't immediately say that she knew him. So if he had her ID, whoa, mind blown. What do you think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to see more, hit that notification bell so you get notified anytime I post. Have a great day, have a happy Easter, hit that like button. I'll see you next time.